Good morning. My name is Sam. I am an alcoholic, and I'm also a son of recovery. Let's start out with the Serenity Prayer. Good and gracious God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. So you may be asking yourself why I'm in the same sweatshirt for 3 days, which is very true. It has actually been 3 days. It's just I changed when I'm doing my readings, and I'm doing them right when I wake up, and I usually wear the sweatshirt right when I wake up. So that is why that's happening. Anyways, I am reading Recovery Dharma, How to Use Buddhist Practices and Principles to Heal the Suffering of Addiction. And we are going through the steps of the Eightfold Path, according to this. And currently, we're on Wise Action. I'm actually going to be reading 3 of them because they're a little shorter today. So I'm going to read Wise Action, Wise Livelihood, and Wise Effort. So here we go. Wise action is also based in the intention to do no harm and to foster compassion, loving kindness, generosity, and forgiveness. We try to do what's skillful and avoid actions that are unskillful. Wise action asks that we try to make choices based on understanding and not unthinking habits or ignorance. The Buddha suggested that we make a commitment to avoid 5 specific actions that cause harm, a commitment which is known as the 5 precepts. We commit to the 5 precepts as our basic ethical system. So, I'm going to read that one more time. The Buddha suggested that we make a commitment to avoid 5 specific actions that cause harm, a commitment which is known as the 5 precepts. We commit to the 5 precepts as our basic ethical system. We set the intention to avoid taking the life of another living being or from causing harm to ourselves or another living being. We set the intention to avoid taking what is not freely given or stealing. We set the intention to avoid causing harm through our sexual conduct and to be aware of the consequences and impact of our sexual activity and desire. We set the intention of being honest, of not lying, of not using speech in a harmful way. We set the intention to avoid the use of intoxicants and intoxicating behavior that cloud our awareness. We need to continually reflect on and question the intentions behind our actions. We may have moments of clarity, but these can quickly pass when old habits or thinking resurfaces. We commit to constantly reminding ourselves of our intention to wise action, to act in ways that are non-harming. So that was wise action. Committing to ways that are non-harming. Wise livelihood. The final factor in the ethical group is wise livelihood, which focuses on how we support ourselves in the world. Again, the intent is to avoid causing harm. For most of us, our work occupies so much of our time and attention, so how we choose to make a living takes on special importance. Understanding the principle of karma and knowing that unwholesome activity gives rise to unwholesome karma, whatever choices or circumstances lead us to a particular job need to be recognized as having karmic consequences. We try to avoid jobs that give rise to suffering and seek work that does no harm or reduces suffering. The Buddha mentions 5 kinds of livelihood to avoid: trading in weapons or instruments of The Buddha mentions 5 kinds of livelihood to avoid: trading in weapons or instruments of killing, trafficking in or selling human beings, killing of other beings, making or selling addictive drugs, or business in poison. We're encouraged to avoid occupations based on dishonesty or injury. Whatever our job is, we can practice it mindfully with an intention of non-harm, of easing suffering, and of compassion. This means developing an attitude toward our occupation beyond just the money we make. We can develop an approach of service and caring about the effects of our actions on others, both within and outside our workspaces. Wise livelihood is not about judging ourselves or others for their choice of work or trying to limit their choices. Instead, we try to understand why and how we engage in whatever occupation we practice. Whatever work we do, we can maintain an intention of benefiting others. So, wise effort. Wise effort is the first of the concentration group. It means concentrating our effort on understanding and recovery of awakening. Wise effort isn't based on how much we should meditate, how much service we should do, or how much time we put into healthy activity. Instead, it's the intention to devote balanced energy to supporting the other parts of the path, particularly wisdom. The first thing to pay attention to is avoiding situations and states of mind that can lead to unwholesome, unskillful, or harmful responses. We become more aware of conditions in our lives and investigate our own responses and reactions to those conditions. When we're operating out of greed, ignorance, confusion, or thinking we can get what we want, we need to be aware of that. We put in the effort and energy to understand what circumstances allowed these conditions to arise and how we can begin to move away from those responses. Energy or effort is also devoted to letting compassion, loving kindness, generosity, and forgiveness arise when they're not present. If we find ourselves reacting with anger rather than compassion, fear instead of generosity, blame instead of forgiveness, we can ask how we would respond if those positive factors were present and begin to respond more skillfully. Being hard on ourselves, beating ourselves up, and suffering from perfectionism are all familiar feelings during addiction and recovery. When we shame ourselves for not being good enough, not trying hard enough, not being enough, these are perfect opportunities to practice wise effort, to reflect on the question, in this moment, how can I be kind and gentle to myself? In earlier recovery, we may be most interested in damage control, simply stopping the destruction and demoralization we have suffered through our habitual, unskillful responses to craving. We can begin by awareness of that craving and learning to make different choices that don't trigger the craving. Sometimes awareness is enough. Sometimes it's all the effort we can muster. As we learn more skillful responses to our triggers, we gain space to have more compassion, loving kindness, generosity, and forgiveness. And as this practice becomes more of a habit, equanimity and peacefulness begin to replace our habits of grasping and selfishness. Pacing ourselves is important. Alternating periods of activity and rest, we need to be aware of what our mind, emotions, body, and recovery can handle right now, and avoid the stress that can come from pushing ourselves too far, too fast. We need to avoid those things that put us into unskillful mind states, and try to do things that return us to a more easeful way of being in the present moment. Try to remember that whatever your experience is right now, it will pass, often in unpredictable ways. Remind yourself that you don't really know how long an unpleasant or painful experience will last. Try to be open to recognizing and investigating the experience while it is present, without interpreting it as a permanent part of your experience. Recognizing that the craving, experience, or thought will pass makes it easier to avoid the impulse to make an immediate, unskillful response. So that was wise effort. That reminds me a lot of things we would say in my early recovery group of, just wait a second, because feelings don't last, and they change, and moments change, and things change really quickly. So getting out of yourself of that moment of feeling like this is it, like in that moment, like this is all of it, this is all the pain, this is all suffering, and not being able to see past it, getting to that point of being able to see past the pain at the moment and knowing like this isn't going to last, I'm going to be okay, is a hard thing to learn. It's hard to get our minds out of that. And so this is saying, like starting to get aware of that is a great thing. I also love the thing about pacing ourselves. So I had brain surgery on June 24th. I'm healing pretty well. The scar is going fine. But as you can see, I'm still having little problems with reading. Just with, just like I start going too quickly sometimes, I feel, and and then I mess up some words. But regarding the brain surgery, pacing ourselves is important. Alternating periods of activity and rest. I've been doing that pretty seriously since coming out of the hospital, having to operate between periods of activity and rest. Getting myself back up to walking every day has been wonderful. And I am back at work, but I'm only back at work a couple days a week because of having to rest and being tired. And I'm just saying this because I remember going through that in recovery, wanting to stretch. And I think about that right now with my recovery from my surgery of, we need to start listening to ourselves really well. And that's what sobriety gave me, was an ability to start listening to my body and knowing oh, I feel like I can do a little bit more today. And stretching myself a little, like adding a little more time to a walk or going a little bit farther, trying to go a little bit faster, or whatever it may be. Learning that we can stretch a little, and then learning on those days when our body's like, I just can't do this right now, listening to that, and not getting lazy, but then also not getting overactive, finding a good balance somewhere. And that's part of, as they say, part of recovery too. It is stretching ourselves, learning to do things a little bit differently again, learning to go to parties again, learning to go out with friends again, learning all those things. It's all about pace. Don't overexert yourself. So tomorrow we'll go on to mindfulness, which will be a really good reading. So today I have a Celtic morning prayer. This morning, as I kindle the fire upon my hearth, I pray that the flame of God's love may burn in my heart and the hearts of all I meet today. I pray that no envy or anger, no hatred or fear may smother the flame. I pray that indifference and apathy, contempt and pride may not pour like cold water on the fire. Instead, may the spark of God's love light the love in my heart, that it may burn brightly throughout the day. And may I warm those who are lonely, whose hearts are cold and lifeless, so that all may know the comfort of God's love. So, as always, please leave any comments, questions, or thoughts. And I hope you all have a wonderful and blessed day.